This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
Delta 8 THC may be all the hype, but did you know that most of the THC out in the market includes Delta 9 THC? That's because most cannabis labs have a hard time accurately analyzing Delta 8, but not New Bloom Labs. New Bloom Labs delivers clear, precise chromatography of Delta 8 products. Their potency testing capabilities include Delta 8, Delta 9, 2 isomers of Delta 10, and a dozen other major and minor cannabinoids that are shaping the industry. If you have ever questioned your lab's potency reports of Delta 8 products, give New Bloom Labs a call, 844-TEST-CBD, or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. New Bloom Labs will deliver the most precise Delta 8 analysis in the country and show you the raw chromatography to back it up. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Brooke Burgstahler, creative actress and founder of Budding Mind. Brooke Burgstahler, take two.
Here we go again.
We're going to make it happen. Just like we said before we recorded, we feel good about it. New setting, new internet service. We're good. It's going to work.
Goose Fraba, baby. I'm ready.
Goose Fraba is right. So before we recorded, just to kind of let the audience bring them into the conversation. You mentioned you're in my home state, which is where I was born and raised in New Mexico, but you're up north.
Yes, I'm in Taos. You are from what seems to be a bit more rural of an area, but nevertheless, New Mexico strong, baby.
It's awesome.
More likely to afford a house here. And
that's right. I mean, hey, my wife and I have been looking, we're thinking, man, there's so much land out there and there's a lot of space, maybe one day we'll move out there,
Once weed is, recreational adult use out here, sky's the limit.
That's exactly right. And I just heard actually that the governor of New Mexico actually proposed the first kind of bill to, or is putting that topic forward, legalization. So it's been years coming. So it's good to see states like New Mexico and all these others, starting to really move the needle when it comes to either medicinal programs or adult use,
Yeah, and I definitely feel like this year with a new administration, a lot of states are probably going to feel more confident to push forward that legislation. So I hope. Yeah. Who knows what could happen at a federal level anyways.
No, you're absolutely right. At the minimum at the federal level, we're hoping to see banking reform, that IRS, what is it, 280E, that tax provision where, these cannabis companies can't even deduct regular normal taxes that any other business would, so legalization would be amazing, but even just at a minimum, that kind of stuff. And Brooke, I can't wait to get into all these topics with you related to cannabis because you're a huge influencer and professional in the space. But before we jump into all that, let's kind of first get a sense of your background. We touched on it in take one a little bit, but I asked you kind of your trajectory and how you got into your acting career, because I know that you've been featured in tons of high profile shows, Blackish, General Hospital, MTV's Greatest Party Story Ever Told, all these big names. So tell us kind of how you got started in that.
Well, thank you for making me feel like a pseudo celebrity by reading my resume.
I got talking points.
Better when it's all squished together in one sentence.
Hey, you have an impressive background. You shouldn't, those are big gigs,
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, as I had mentioned before, still on the journey of cracking that code to success, but I moved out to LA as an actress, performer. I like to be in front of people. So when I moved out to LA, I definitely thought that I was going to be booked on a CW sitcom within minutes. I was going to be on the next Vampire Diaries, and it was, that it was going to be the end game, and I would be a celebrity by the age of 23 and writing cookbooks by the age of 25. things that, you know, the
You,
reality of the industry has certainly humbled me, and has also, due to just having to rework my expectations, it opened up a whole new playing field for me in the cannabis space. And for that, I am truly grateful. Plan B can kind of be your plan A. And yeah, because I moved out to LA and got working in a state that was legal, weed was legal here, it enabled me a bevy of opportunities that I would have never even believed. My younger stoner high school Brooke would have never been able to fathom working legitimately in the cannabis space.
well,
And it's so
I can't even fathom it. I mean, obviously, like living in Texas, which barely has a medicinal program, right? It's very limited. That to me, when I talk to professionals like yourself and others in the industry, and how they got their start at 18 years old in a dispensary, and like I'm like, what kind of world is that? Because that's just so not the case here, right? I mean, we have our CBD shops that have sprung up since the last administration passed the Farm Bill in 2018. But besides that, it's just kind of it's different. But
yeah.
I see your point in that your acting career really kind of our skill sets and your media, right? Your whole kind of media background with content and content development and all that kind of is something that you brought to the table as a huge asset, right? Within the cannabis space, because we're seeing all these different people who are connected to the plant, but they all bring in different value and different skill sets, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every industry, every background will eventually intersect with the cannabis industry. And here I am in the entertainment aspect, which is, arguably one of the more fun ones. Here you are too. Look at this studio.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And it is fun because, there's so many different benefits to it. You've got the educational benefit, right? Where you're learning and growing as a person or as a professional, but you're also disseminating content and information that also helps others educate themselves and grow and learn. And it's an exciting space to be in. And so I don't want to jump ahead, but since we're on this topic, you're a big proponent of this term edutainment, right? And it's a lot around what of the content of what you produce. So talk to us about how you use edutainment to creatively enhance others' lives.
Right on. Well, obviously, it's educational entertainment, and I just love a good label. So I smushed them together. And yeah, I really love, there's so much to know about the cannabis plant. And I'm very fortunate to be in a space where my work enables me to continuously learn about the plant and distilling that information into digestible, bite-sized forms of content. I'm a millennial, so I kind of excel at under 1 minute PowerPoint presentations,
Right.
word vomiting about weed. But yeah, I think that it's a really important. A lot of cannabis brands will say that one of their pillars is educating people beyond just selling and marketing their product. And that's because there's so much to know, and there's so much there's so much nuance that the more you know, the more you can tailor your experience to yourself. And it's not a one size fits all medicine. And I think that that's even more exciting, to constantly be peeling back the layers of the onion of what is accessible in this plant. And the more information I can share with people, the more they might see a layer of that onion and be like, oh, you know what? I actually wasn't into weed, but now that she mentions it, maybe I'm
Right.
gonna rub some on my sore shoulder. I don't know.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. And I like the example you give of the layers, because when I look at your background and what you've done in the edutainment / cannabis space is you've kind of you've produced media wearing different hats, right? I know that you were a reporter for Mary Jane.
Mhm.
which is that owned by Snoop Dogg and Seth Rogen? Is that
Yeah, there's some of the owners.
okay? Got you. Yes, but
Like,
so they're involved in that network, and that role, you really did you do a docu-series where you focused on prisoners that were convicted on life sentences for cannabis related offenses, right?
yeah, that's correct. That was Prisoners of Prohibition. And so that was something that I wrote and produced and helped to direct. And that was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And when we were embarking on this subject with Mary Jane, it was very, very difficult to find any information about people really serving time. There were far few organizations at that time that I could lean on and investigate into. Now we have LPP and Cage Free Cannabis and all of these like celebrity endorsed organizations that are bringing this information forward. And that's all for the better. But it was quite a struggle at the time when we were trying to produce this to like, really find what is true out there as well, because there's a lack of information and there's a lot of misinformation about how many people are really serving time for weed, because a few years ago people weren't that interested. There wasn't a desire to know how many thousands of people are incarcerated for pot.
Right.
It just like wasn't, there was no government organization that was providing that information either. So, and largely a lot of the statistics that you see today are thanks to like the ACLU and private organizations that have sifted through layers and layers of muck to bring this to the people. But yeah, Prisoners of Prohibition was a very exciting project, and it enabled me to speak with, like, have conversations.
You visited these inmates, right? I mean, like you were actually in the prisons, weren't you?
No. I was not in the prisons.
Okay.
And that was a really interesting thing. I, again, was naive and thought, oh, well, I should just be able to go into a prison and ask a couple questions to an inmate. Like that, I'm a journalist. Unless you've got a fat check on you and your NBC, it's very, very difficult to obtain those interviews actually in the prison. So I was communicating with a lot of people through Core Links, which is like an email service, intermediary service for someone on the outside, someone on the inside, and talking to a lot of family members and a lot of organization heads. Can Do Clemency, Amy Pova of Can Do Clemency. You heard it here, Kevin. She is, she is the OG. Can Do stands for Clemency for All Nonviolent Drug Offenders.
Right. Okay.
And she was serving time. She was basically taking the rap for her ex-husband for a drug crime. And she fought desperately for her own clemency and was granted release by Bill Clinton, because they're both from Arkansas. So there was a little, whatever.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes sense.
She works tirelessly on behalf of all kinds of nonviolent drug offenders. And she actually is largely to thank for the dozens of pot prisoners who received release, pardoned under the Trump administration.
Wow.
So,
and Corvain Cooper being one, right? I know I read some articles about him, and the Last Prisoner Project was very focused on his case because Evelyn LaChapelle, who was on my show recently, was connected to that crime, I believe, right? I mean, I think that they were both, which is so crazy. He got a life sentence, and she was looking at, like, I think she said initially like 15 years or something like that for.
Holy shit.
And she's a single mother, like no prior offenses at all. Like the fact that the system doesn't look at the background and really take into consideration, okay, is this a repeat offender? Do they have a background? You know what I'm saying? Like that to me is wild. They just throw them the maximum sentence, and call it a day.
It's not a case by case thing. Our, war on drugs really was just like a blanket prescription for anyone that committed a crime related to a substance.
Right.
And yeah, I think when you really look at it, it's a perfect example. People serving time for weed is like the most perfect prime example of corruption in our government.
100%.
Why should someone like Corvain Cooper or Craig Cecil, who have children, who have, had honest jobs, who made one mistake, rot in prison for eternity? It's
Right. And you've got other
Breaks
offenders
my
in
heart.
there. You got other offenders in there that have done far worse things. And even if they were a one-time offender as well, they're getting less time. You know what I mean? There's this demonization and it's about the plant that's gotten so vast and just so that they've really kind of exploited, you know what I mean, what they can do in terms of penalties and crimes, and even of course other types of control with federal regulation.
Mhm.
So while you were doing that, was there anything that really shocked you and like surprised you, doing that investigative reporting, learning about some of these cases? And you even mentioned the numbers, like trying to find exactly how many were incarcerated. Like, did you stumble upon anything that really fascinated you?
Uh, well, I think one of the main things that fascinated me in the beginning of the journey was the lack of information, and really how grassroots this initiative to inform people about pot prisoners and get them out, how grassroots that movement really was. Um, and I would say that my biggest takeaway was, I'm a very emotional person, but when you really start, like we were saying, it should be a case by case instance. When you're looking at the face of someone who has, a wife, children, a home, has a whole life behind them that's being ripped from them, it's very emotional, and it was difficult for me to make sense of a lot of it. And there was one particular person, Craig Cecil, who, for I don't really know why, but he reminded me so much of my dad in some ways. And he was a truck repairman, and he had been repairing trucks that were used to traffic drugs. And his claim is that he had no idea that's what the trucks were being used for. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what
Right.
he said.
Right.
Even if he did know, he's a truck repairman. That is not a man that is trying to do anything lofty.
Right.
He's trying to make a living.
Right.
And he had two children, and his daughter was around my age, and his kids were severely affected by his imprisonment. And his son, this is just going to get darker and darker, Kevin, but his son actually died. His son was in his 20s. He died while he was in prison.
Oh my
And
gosh.
even though Craig Cecil was a non-violent cannabis offender, he was not allowed to leave to attend his own son's funeral.
That's just inhumane,
I
like,
know. And I apologize to all the listeners out there for
no,
ruining your day.
it's important that these
Yeah,
stories are shared though, you know what I mean?
to put
Because
faces to these
yeah,
individuals,
and
humanize them.
you got to humanize them, you got to tell their story, because you hear so much good about the industry in terms of public support and adoption and sales going up and investment deals, but we also need to make sure that we are telling these stories, because those are the people that laid the foundation for where we are today, you know what I
Yes,
mean?
our
And
industry is built off of their backs.
right,
And can you
exactly.
imagine sitting in prison? Can you
No,
imagine
no,
sitting
I
in prison
can't.
right now and then reading the news like, I'm sorry, what? I have to eat slop every day and work this really weird job for 50 cents an hour while MedMen is making billions of dollars in multiple states that I was convicted in? Are
Yo,
you kidding me?
I said the same exact thing to Evelyn when I interviewed her. I was like, what were you thinking when you flipped open a magazine and saw these beautiful buds, people holding in their, greenhouses and stuff while you're sitting in prison? She's like, she said there was a sense of anger. There was a sense of, but she said it was more of a realization that she understood that the system was flawed, because before she thought that she was serving time and she was doing her time because she was accused and she did the wrong thing. But that really changed her mindset. Like, wait a second. You know what I mean? There is no harm with this plant. Like, there is, people are starting to wake up, and now I'm being at fault for it, or by the system. So
Mhm.
I'm totally with you. Like, to put yourself in that perspective, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And all of these people that, then I think about all these people who have been pardoned, not just drug offenders or whatever. When you're released from prison, well, how are you going to get a job? Where are
Right.
you supposed to live? And you probably have so many psychological issues. the road doesn't stop at getting people out of prison. And that's another thing that I would love to see support being driven from the cannabis industry is these people that have been pardoned. Should we start a Kickstarter and send them some money? And that's no joke.
Right.
That would really be beneficial. And how can we extend opportunities to these people who have been released from prison to enter into the industry that has wronged them and not feel deathly afraid that they'll be sent back to prison?
Mm-hmm. No, you bring up a really good point, and this is the distinction that Andrew D'Angelo made, and it's an important one that should be repeated in that social, like restorative justice is separate than social equity, right? So what we're talking about in terms of these people who have been, accused of these nonviolent cannabis crimes and whatnot, obviously we need to reform that legislation. There needs to be restorative justice there. Social equity is the component that you're talking about where they're released. We need to make sure that these people are able to be placed in jobs and not punished for the prior crimes that they were charged for. And a perfect example is I had a Texas state senator on, and he was a lawyer before, and he was saying that he had a case where he was representing a guy who had he was accused of a cannabis nonviolent crime. He couldn't even get a job at McDonald's.
Wow.
Like, so that just goes to show you, like, if you can't get a job at McDonald's after serving time, where else do you go from there besides falling back into the system, right?
And you might not be able to vote. And again, these are all just building blocks of a system being made to work against people, obviously.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, no, I'm so glad that we touched on that, because again, it's super important that those stories are told. And I talk about these hats that you wear in this edutainment space. So, we talked about the social equities, restorative justice component where you kind of wore that investigative hat. Now let's talk about the marijuana morning news show, which Brooke, I love that show. I don't know if you're still doing it or not, but at the time, like, I would just be the best, like you mentioned earlier, consumable content, get it quick, get it fast, and it was a global perspective, which was nice too. So
Right on. Well, I appreciate that. Yes, the show is still up and running. You can watch it in a myriad of places on Instagram, on YouTube, and who knows where next.
dun dun dun.
But yeah, I write, I shoot that from the comfort of my own home. Thank you, coronavirus. And host it, edit it. It airs 5 times a week, and it's short form digestible content. There's not a lot of video content being produced in the cannabis space that is news oriented. There's obviously plenty of platforms that I'm sure you read, MJ Biz, Daily Marijuana Moment, etc., that are really great resources for actual articles. But when it comes to trying to format that information in a different way and ideally present it to someone who wouldn't be visiting these cannabis websites, that's really my end goal, is how can this be, we're in a niche industry. While everyone smokes weed, it's a broad net of people that appreciate the plant. Nevertheless, people that want to know about like the nitty gritty, that people that actually want to know about the science of cannabinoids, it starts to get a smaller and smaller.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. The demographic starts to shrink a little bit there. Your audience size gets a little limited. Yeah.
Yeah. So my goal is to try to make things as interesting and entertaining as possible for someone who doesn't even enjoy weed.
Right. And that's not a knock to the people that are super geek out on like the cannabinoids, because I like to also, but like I see what you're saying in that, like, it's so complex. There's so much to learn about it, right? That like just to have a kind of an easy kind of broad understanding to kind of get put into that's consumable, and it's on a platform like Instagram, that's very visual, right? You can either share photos or videos, so you want to make sure that content is high level, it's quick, it's informative, it's helpful. And you do a great job of it. I mean, that's just kind of one example of the portfolio that you kind of put out there.
I love it. Reading, writing, and talking about weed. Like, how could I be any more lucky?
Well, now we're going to talk about a topic that I think you're really going to love, because it's all those things plus the wellness factor, because I know you're big on wellness as well. And so when I kind of look at Brooke's toolbox, if you will, you like to live a more fulfilled life, and you do different things to do that, whether it, be cannabis, and I think like you do a lot of yoga, right? So kind of, what does it mean to Brooke to live a wellness type of life?
Well, first of all, I notice things in the day to day, like Kevin holding a soft tiger's eye stone that he's been rubbing
This is
for
my
magic.
worry. This is my worry stone. This is my yeah. It helps me with these episodes.
I love a tiger's eye moment. Um, well, I'm very, very interested in cannabis as a wellness component, and I do think that the wellness and medicinal aspects of the plant are largely to thank for legalization efforts. I think that's why we are where we are today, is because there is data and science and research that proves that cannabis can help you in a myriad of ways. And I want to make cannabis, I am the filter for people like me, where cannabis is just another tool in your toolbox to enhance your everyday life. And I'm not like, I don't wear flat brim hats and rip dabs. That's not what I'm about at all. And I actually encourage consumers of that nature to look at things in a different light. How can cannabis help you? And how can you have the most positive relationship with this substance? Because it is an external substance. And anytime you're dealing with something that is external, you really have to be aware of your relationship with that thing. And, no matter how good and positive, no matter how many benefits there are to weed, it can be abused. It can be bad for you. Smoking every day is not going to be good for your lungs. So how can you view this? It's a very multifaceted, tool.
I want to dive a little deeper in this, because you have a lot of experience with the plant, right? Especially from a legal perspective, living in California. So that's important, because I've noticed myself, like to your point earlier, I love to consume cannabis for the enhancement effect, right? And I feel more creative, I feel more happy, I feel more kind, more thoughtful of my words, and I self-aware. But at the same time, there are times where I have abstained, and then like say I've worked out, or like I'm sore and I went for a run, and then I come home and I consume the can, I smoke, and then it's just like, wow, like I totally feel 100% like how it's just treating every soreness and ailment, and if I was on edge, I'm more relaxed. So basically what I'm saying is that, of course, when you abstain, you kind of feel more of the effect, right, if you smoke later. So what are your consumption methods? Like, how do you kind of go about it?
Well, it's a mixed bag over here, but I just like my food, I want to know what's in my weed. I want to know as much as possible about cannabis, like where is it from? How is it grown? What can I say? I'm bougie and I prefer an organic, outdoor grown,
That's
local
fine.
flower.
That's not bougie. I would be right there with you. I'm right there with you. Yeah.
There we go. I prefer smoking over vaping. Now, of course, a lot of science will tell you that vaping should be better for your lungs than smoking, but something about it, I think we'll find out like a decade from now that you shouldn't be vaping as much as you do. When you make anything that convenient, it starts to get, for me, it can get excessive.
I agree with that, because the vaping accessibility is so easy to pull it wherever you're at that you almost tend to smoke more than you normally would, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I smoke daily, I consume daily, and I just try to have, a soft hand on it. I don't wake and bake. I try to get as much done as possible before I smoke. And then I think like a really important component is, as a performer, like I did not get high for this podcast because I'm frankly much more coherent when I'm not stoned. I don't usually smoke before I'm on camera, because I've learned that lesson the hard way. I've done stand up high. I've tried to
Tell
do
us a story. Tell us a story. Tell us a story.
Oh no, I mean less than stand up high. Just I've gone to auditions high,
Yeah.
thinking this is where I'm my best. Let me get stoned before I have to perform in front of a bunch of producers. It did not work out in my favor. That's how you forget your lines.
I've been there. You
dramatic.
get overconfident. Like I've been there, right? You do it so much where you're like, no, I'm on the level here. This is perfect. And then you have that brain fart or like,
Yes,
and
the
then
brain farts. There you
yes. Yeah.
So I just think, being smart about if you need to be productive, how can you best enhance that productivity? Maybe it's coffee over weed.
Right.
And then I really do think there is something about your emotional processing, because for me, riding the waves of hormones or just life, a lot of times I want to lean on cannabis to take me out of that state. And I think it's really, really important now more than ever for people to know when that's the right move and when you are leaning on an external source to solve your problems. When are you numbing? When are you putting a blanket over this thing that as soon as you're not high, it's just going to be ripped off of you? And so I really hope that people, yeah, just feel inspired to be as intelligent as they can with their relationship with weed, because it can do so many wonderful things for you.
It really can. Yeah. And it's so important. Like you mentioned, too much of anything can be a bad thing, right? So there has to be a balance, and you never want to use it as a crutch and, uh, use it as a blanket to kind of cover different emotions that you're feeling. You got to address those things in different ways, whether it
Yeah.
be, your diet or exercise or, seeing someone or what have you. But no, that makes sense. Now, a little related question: is there any other plant-based therapeutic medicines that you take? So like, we're seeing the boom with psilocybin. So do you ever take psilocybin or not really?
Okay. Of course. I was
Okay, all
actually thinking
right.
about this the other day. I was like, damn, am I becoming so old where I'm like, we used to just like eat gross mushrooms and go lay in a park. And now there's beautiful packaging for microdose capsules
Or
that are meant to,
chocolates.
or chocolates.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I love mushrooms. They have gifted me with a lot of eye-opening and enlightening growth over my experiences. And that was well before, that was me just like taking mushrooms, not knowing what's going to happen. Now we have so many resources for information that prior to engaging in that experience, if you're new to mushrooms or new to psilocybin, you can really do the homework to make sure that you have like the best possible experience. And if you have an intention, how can you meet that intention?
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I dove head first into plant medicines. Like, I guess we'll see what happens on the other side.
No, 100%. So college, I consumed psilocybin quite a bit, in fact, but it was like the way you did in terms of just grind up these dried up mushrooms, put it on
Put
a
it on a piece of
pizza.
peanut butter
Yeah.
toast.
Put it on a pizza or whatever, right? And it was more of like a whoa experience, right? Like, okay, that was fun, but like as I've gotten older, and like you said, now that the industry is becoming more legitimized for like medicinal purposes when it comes to mental illness or PTSD or things like that. I mean, I don't really deal with those, but I do it more for like a reset. So I'll microdose, but I'll really just kind of sit back and kind of remove myself out of the equation, take my ego out, and just kind of let things be, and see things from a different perspective. And that's kind of how I reset and I'm enlightened. I don't do it as much, I mean, I'm probably like once or twice every 2 months.
Adulthood.
But yeah, exactly. Because I do feel like the next day I feel exhausted if you're up late, or for some reason my lower back kind of really hurts.
Ooh, that's
Oh,
something to
why?
investigate.
I know. I don't know. And I know there's different type of fungi and all that, but man, I'll tell you, and I know that I've had prior ailments from wrestling and all that, but it's really exacerbated, it seems like, after that.
Interesting. Wow, that totally makes sense. You kind of do seem like a wrestler to me. Oh, I
Yeah.
get it. I get the vibe.
Well, I'm not very tall, so I had to join a sport that had weight classes, so
Uh-huh.
wrestling worked out. Yeah.
Grow out, not up. Got it.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm hugely in favor and supportive of all plant medicines. You just can't convince me that if something comes from the earth, it should be regulated.
I know.
That's
That
not my
argument is so
logic.
insane. Like, how did we ever make a plant illegal? Isn't that crazy?
because it was doing miraculous things for people.
It was threatening industries also.
Precisely, yeah. But I microdose now occasionally as well. I've dabbled with that process, zero point 0.1 milligrams of psilocybin in beautifully packaged vitamins. Just, I love packaging. It really speaks to me. And it's thrilling to think that people, my own mother, my own family has a history of using antidepressant medications, and to think about the next generations that could have a more holistic approach to healing the, ancestral trauma
Yeah.
is it's a very exciting time. But obviously watching these industries unfold, having been in the cannabis industry for a while now, I'm witnessing, so are you, we're witnessing the same negative patterns repeat themselves,
Right.
and the same just consumerism putting its muddy hands into something so beautiful and natural. And I think it's our responsibility to try to help put the bumpers on this road for psychedelic medicine, how to keep it as authentic as possible and pay reverence to the people who have come before us, largely indigenous people who have been
Right.
practicing with these medicines for millennia and enabled us, opened up this world to us. How do we pay reverence to them and stay humble in allowing these plants to help us all.
Right. Yeah. The focus shouldn't be just the lucrative opportunity, because there's so much history that comes to it. Right. And so there needs to be a sense of tribute or respect that's paid, like you said, to these indigenous people and the people that we talked about earlier who have laid the path, for where we're at today. And Brooke, speaking on holistic medicine, living a fully well life, I know that you have your company, Budding Mind. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what all you're doing there?
Right on. Well, Budding Mind is a cannabis and wellness platform that exists largely on the internet. And I aspire for it to be a place for people to discover different methodologies of consumption, again, all along the lines of wellness. How can this plant help you heal, not get you high necessarily? And how can cannabis become integrated into your wellness portfolio? And things beyond cannabis as well, like what other herbs can you smoke? Cannabis has enlightened me to a lot of other plant medicines, not ones that are illegal either. Things like lavender and mullein leaf and mugwort.
Right.
All of these herbal medicines that have existed long before we have and can be incorporated into our daily lives. And I hope to it's another edutainment platform.
Beautiful. Awesome. And where can people find this platform if they wanted to follow you on social or your website?
Okay, we are on Instagram at Budding Mind, and our website, listen closely, is buddingmind.life.
Buddingmind.life.
Yes, that's correct. If I wanted the .com, I was going to have to pay someone $50,000 in Argentina. That's right.
And that's a big negative. Don't do that. It's not worth it. They'll find you off of SEO. And make sure, I want to be like one of those cool YouTubers. Smash that subscribe button on Brooke's YouTube channel as well.
Right on. Thank you so much, Kevin. It was so beautiful speaking with you.
Yes, I had such a great time. Thanks for being a good sport with the whole technical difficulties thing and coming back on. It was a great conversation, and I know that the audience really is going to get a lot out of it. So, Brooke, keep blazing the trails in the edutainment space, and I want you to come on real soon as the industry continues to evolve, and maybe if you have cool announcements that are happening out of Budding Mind.
Likewise. Okay, cool. Thank you, Kevin. Beautiful.
Cool. All right, we'll talk to you later, and thanks for listening,
Bye from
guys.
New Mexico.
Bye.